Alright guys, how's it going? Welcome back. I'll carry on here. At this point in this tutorial series, I want to talk a little bit about tossing your saber around, if you're so inclined to do so. Full disclosure, not responsible if you break any of your stuff. I know that seems like really obvious, but you gotta, in 2020, you gotta be careful. So, at your own risk, do anything that I'm showing at your own risk. That really goes for anything in this stuff, but specifically tossing your saber around. You break it, it's on you, it's not on me. But anyways, throwing this thing around a little bit can get some really interesting results and make your spins even more cool, and can flow into other types of spins. You can change hands. You can even do it in a fight if you're good enough. I mean, there's a lot of benefits to learning how to do this, but it takes time, it takes practice. You're gonna drop your saber a lot. So if you have a really nice saber and a stunt saber, use that stunt saber to practice with. Don't use your really nice saber, just to be safe, you know. But basically, I'm gonna talk about tossing it from a forward spin, tossing it from a backward spin, changing hands, and then also, you know, linking tosses together, and some other fun stuff. So the very first thing I'll talk about is tossing from a forward spin. So when I say tossing, by the way, I mean this. So you probably can't see very well because it's a little dark, but I'm doing a backward spin here, and when it gets to about there, I'm releasing it and letting it fly back into my hand. So I'm literally like tossing it into my hand like that. Forward spin, same thing. It just has to fly a little bit further for that to happen. And you can also let it spin even further than that and catch it in a reverse grip, which we'll talk about in the next video, but I'll demonstrate it here. So from a forward spin, you let the saber drop just as you were, and I do this. You can do it, see, told you, you're gonna drop it a lot. You can do it off to your side if you want to. You can do that. You can do it in front of you as well. I tend to do a lot of my tossing in front of me, just because, I mean, if you're doing it for anybody to see, it makes sense that you'd want to have them see it in front of you. But some things I do behind my back and around. It just depends on your preference, right? And once you get an idea, it's just like when you were learning your forward and backward spins and changing the angles. It's the same idea. You figure out how to do this one way, change angles and get comfortable with it, and then you can do it however you want. So for this, I'm going to show you in front of you. So forward spin, we let it drop, right? And right about here where your wrist is going to break, instead of guiding your arm around it, excuse me, and letting your wrist get relieved so you can guide it with your hand, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to let it break right here, and I'm going to let it go. And when I let it go, the weight of it is going to want it to spin at the same axis. So if you were in a vacuum and you did that, it would literally want to do this and slowly go that way as it spun. So it's natural. I'm letting it swing. I'm not doing anything, but it wants to keep going, right? And so we're using that motion to go all the way across, and then I'm just grabbing it again. You gotta kind of get a feel for where your grip point is. Like I said, I use the choke on this saber right here. I'm always grabbing it and trying to catch it here. And it also gives me leeway, so if I miss, I've got this whole rest of this hilt to catch and try not to drop it, right? But whatever works best for you. So again, I'm gonna let it break right here. It can't go any further without breaking my wrist. And I'm gonna let it go and then re-catch it again. So I'm gonna try to, hopefully you can see this. I know it's a little dark, but. So I'm lifting my hand slightly right here. I'm lifting my hand right about here. I lift it up just a little bit to kind of help guide it and not have it drop. But the idea is the same. I'm letting the weight of the tip, letting the top weight bring it all the way across. And then I'm just, as of practicing and getting a feel for it, knowing when to grab your hand on it again. If you've ever skateboarded, it's the exact same thing as when you're doing a kickflip, and you gotta feel when you're supposed to put your back foot down to catch the board on your foot, because the board just wants to keep going up in the air, and you gotta know when to catch it with your back foot. It just takes time and experience. So, again, forward spin and catching, just like that. See every time I catch it, because my clap is going off. And if you can get smooth, you can do it without that happening. Right? Backward spin, same idea. I'll do it in front of me. Backward spin. Right about here is where my wrist is gonna break. I'm gonna let that go, and then I'm gonna catch it. The great thing about the backward spin that makes it easy, or easier anyways, is when you release, you don't have to let it fly before catching. You're releasing and basically just rolling your hand and it's right there again. So it's very easy to catch. With your backward or your forward spin, right about there you have to release and you've got to totally spin your hand around again to catch it. And by the time you spun your hand around, it's about right there or so. So a backward spin is a safer option and a little bit easier to learn. And it's the one I use the most. So you backward spin in front of your body and right about where it breaks, you just release and catch. And give it a little bit of a lift too, just to make sure that you don't drop it. So I just lift right about there and catch. So it really just rolls across my hand and it's literally just rolling right across my hand. So for demonstration, backward spin, catching it. Again, I told you you're gonna drop it a lot, especially at inopportune times like, hey, let me demonstrate this, and then I mess it up. So hopefully you can kind of see what I'm talking about. You're literally just rolling your hand and catching it. And you'll get a feel for it the more you do it. So now you know you have to figure out where you're gonna put those two catches. Just to start as like a simple basic point. So I like to do that backward spin catch after an obiani, right at the tail end of the obiani, right? Because you do a backward spin right here as you're drawing it out. If you learned from that last video, if you're drawing it out, and you're already doing a backward spin. I like to throw in a catch right there to end the obiani and bring it to something else, or continue the obiani and just do a cool flourish. So slowly, that's the move. And so it gives it this cool extra spin without me having to break my wrist in a weird way, or sometimes it'll go out like this as you're trying to spin it around. It doesn't look as good. And it's kind of cool to throw and catch your saber. I mean, let's be real. So, like I said, drop it a lot. Right? At the end of that obiani, if you get really comfortable with it, you can do a continuous spin, and it looks pretty cool, especially in the dark. So check this out. So if you want to add that spin in, that throw at the end of an obiani, pardon me, I'm still sick, my nose is running. That spin there, almost dropped it again, you can bring that across and continue in your obiani and make it a continuous motion. The idea behind that is when you're bringing it across and you're doing that toss and that roll, bring it a little farther before you throw it. So about right there, because then it kind of almost leads itself right into the next spin. If you do it in front of you here, you still have to bring it across and it's a little bit less fluid. So right here, I would bring it across and throw it right about there. And the more you do this, the more comfortable you get, you'll feel it. It almost feels like it's glued to your hand, because as you spin it and throw it, you're so comfortable that it feels like it just guides right in your hand every time. You almost feel like Spider-Man or something. So your reverse spin, or your forward, I'm sorry, I always call it reverse. It's your forward spin and catch. Here, where I like to do that is if I wanted to switch into a reverse grip, I let it spin 90 degrees, or 180 degrees more than it should. So instead of catching it here, I let it spin just a little farther. And now I've caught it upside down. And that can lead into some really cool reverse grip stuff. So, again, see what I'm saying? So I'm letting it come to about here. I'm breaking my hand. And just like I said to spin and catch here, except for I'm letting it spin an extra 180 and catching it reverse grip. That's a lot harder. Catching a reverse grip is weird because it's the opposite of what you just were doing, and it's not something that is going to be intuitive. But again, practice slowly and carefully, you know, on a surface where you're not going to break anything, using a saber that you're not as worried about damaging, to get something like this. So again, I'm going to do a forward spin. I'm going to catch it in a reverse grip and start doing a reverse grip forward and forward spins. I think that looks pretty cool.